And thank you everyone for joining, especially I think on a Saturday evening in India. I will try my best to make this session extremely meaningful for everyone. So let's quickly go through the agenda, the things that I want to cover today. I'll spend the first maybe 15-ish minutes just helping everybody understand what analytics basically means, what it means in general, but what it also means for product managers and why is it so important. And then I have a small section where I also help deconstruct how product managers in a real world work with analytics teams or data scientists or data analysts. So I have a small visual to help you kind of understand the real picture. And then spend the next about 15-ish, 20 minutes talking about metrics, because I feel that metrics is in itself a very, very vague concept, but a very important aspect of analytics. I usually do these sessions to, when I do these sessions, every time I switch topics or every time I switch slides, I'm going to pause and going to check if people have questions. I like to answer questions, there and then. So the ones that are most relevant, I'll keep answering them throughout the presentation, but I'll also try to save about 10 to 15 minutes at the end so that we can take more questions. Okay, so while Aries introduced me maybe a little bit more, so I've worked across multiple segments, and the only reason I want to bring that out is that I see that a lot of people are coming from different, like they're at different points in their lives. So I just want to help everybody understand that product management, fortunately, is a place where it's kind of easy to switch segments, switch sectors, switch industries. I've done that quite a lot. I worked in B2B, I've worked in SaaS, I've worked in B2C. I've also had a startup of my own. And the other thing which actually I missed calling out on the slide is also that every company does their titles or designations very, very differently. So that's not something that you should be too caught up about. I usually recommend everybody focusing on the problem statement that you will be solving for your employer or for the company or the startup you're joining. And as long as the problem statement is exciting and motivating, you should do it. By education, I'm a computer engineer. I also have an MBA. I love to learn. Especially about product management or in general about what's happening in the tech world or with the big tech companies. I share a lot of what I learn primarily on LinkedIn and Twitter. So if you're on either of the platforms, feel free to add me. I share really, really often. Okay, let's jump in. So this is the section where I will pause for a second for the audience, and I'd like all of you to type in the chat what you think analytics means. And doesn't have to be very specific, like a basic understanding of what you think it means. Okay, Manpreet says numbers. Somebody else also says playing with numbers. Analysis of an issue using numbers, understanding how your product actually is, taking decisions based on data, making sense of data, story of presenting data, measuring performance, aggregating data points, driving hypotheses, mathematical stories, finding patterns, database decisions, problem solving using numbers, quantifiable insights. Okay. I think across the responses that I'm still reading, I think all of you have covered what it really means. But I'll also try to share a very simplistic definition that I in my mind use. So analytics basically is the process of using quantitative measures or quantitative methods to derive meaning from data, right? And typically, good analytics will allow us to make decisions, right? So that is the key here, where you can have data, you can derive meaning from it, but if it doesn't lead to a decision, it's kind of senseless, right? Like then you ask yourself, what have I wasted my time on? Like I understand the trend, but if it's not allowing me to make decisions, it's not that meaningful. Okay, again, question for the audience. What do you see is happening in the list of numbers that you see on the screen? Odd numbers, pattern, AP, a gap of 2, odd numbers increase by 2, odd numbers. Okay, so everybody got it, right? One more question. What do you see in the list of, I think they should all be states. Yeah, in the list of states that you see. Metro cities, states. Okay, there's iteration. It has a city too. Okay, I agree. Delhi is actually 3 times repetitive states. Okay, so I think what's happening is, if I did this correctly, I think Delhi is repeating every 4th time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, something like that. Anyways, so the goal is that, you know, what all of you did in the list of numbers and the list of cities/states is that you pretty much did analytics, right? You looked at you looked at some data points and you tried to create something quantitative out of it. In the first, it was, hey, these are odd numbers, have a gap of 2. In the second one, it's things like, these are metro cities or metro states, or there are repetitive states, etc. So before I jump into and dive deep into what analytics means, I want to help everybody understand that analytics is something that all of us do in our daily lives. And I have an example of what I very recently did in my daily lives. So it's not something that needs to be studied or I mean, if you can study and learn it, nothing like it, right? But a lot of people ask me that, hey, you know what, I'm not good at analytics. Can I ever be like a great PM and things like that? In my mind, everybody's doing analytics. It's just the context and the quantum of data that you consume is very, very different, right? So this is a real world example. Very recently, about a couple of months back, I was buying a microwave for myself, and this is one of the screens that I was looking at. And what I had done was I had kind of narrowed down based on some parameters. You know, my pricing, like my budget was between 70 to 80, maybe 90 pounds, some wattage, some size, etc. So now when I look at the screen, right, like this gives me a really, really good view of everything I care about. And it gives me a very good comparison, and it gives me the required input that I need to make my decision. And that's what I did here, right? So I started looking at the ones that have reviews, because I have a lot of bias in terms of, I usually buy things that have a lot of reviews and a higher rating. Then, capacity matters. So 20 liters is something I was looking for, things like that. So again, reiterating the point that I'm sure that a lot of you, when you bought things online, or forget online, even offline, when you go into a shop, you are comparing multiple options. And in your mind, you're already sort of doing some trade-off of option A is better than B because, it has higher reviews, or because somebody who has recommended it to you. So there are different parameters you're using, but the larger picture is that you are doing analytics. So once again, analytics is something that you shouldn't be scared of. You should kind of feel that this is something that happens very, very often in your life. And today in the session, I'll help you understand how you can use that skill set that you use every day and put it into product management, and how that can help your career. Okay, quickly, one more question. So in the previous slide, we kind of spoke about analytics in general. Now the question is, what do you think is product analytics specifically? Again, feel free to type in the chat. Okay, I am not seeing any responses. I'm not sure if, okay, now I am. All right, maybe there was a bit of a lag. Okay, drawing insights about product, performance measurement in numbers, discovering product strategy, using data to understand product performance with respect to business, data points of specific products, measuring success, customer journey, improving the product, interpreting insights of the product, customer insights, analytics and product, metrics of products, adoption. Okay. I think again, a lot of the answers have covered kind of the entire picture. Let me again share something super basic and super simple. So in my mind, the moment you are thinking of product analytics, you are trying to understand how your users or customers are interacting with the product. And if the analytics is done well, then obviously it will lead to insights, it will lead to decisions and whatnot. But overall, you are trying to understand the user interaction with the product, and that is what is product analytics. There are other types of analytics as well, where you're not necessarily looking at interaction. You might be looking at revenue numbers or sales numbers or things like that. But in general, product analytics is usually referred to the aspect of something to do with like the actual usage of your product. The most commonly used things when you ask somebody about analytics, they talk about things like, hey, I'm measuring adoption, I'm measuring engagement, I'm measuring retention. All of these are behaviors on the product, right? If a person creates an account on Instagram and then starts browsing their feed, they've kind of adopted to the platform. Now, if they, while they're doing it, if they're sharing, if they're liking, commenting, reacting to a post, they're engaging with it. And if they come back every week, they're retaining on it, right? So this is how, like, this is the most basic and the most common way of product analytics that a lot of people think about. So I have a detailed slide coming up which talks about why is it important, but I think the larger message is product analytics is one of the very, very good and targeted ways of identifying the real needs of the customers or identifying the real problems that the customers are facing, right? So for example, if your adoption rate has been at 20% for the averaged across the last 12 months, but it dropped to 15 this month, then you definitely know there is some problem that's happening in the entire adoption flow, right? Maybe the sign up flow is broken, or maybe the feed is not loading and hence people are not able to browse and things like that. So analytics will do two things. One, it will tell you the good story, which means what do customers or users like? So, what are their preferences? Or it can even go deeper and say, if they're for example, if they're using Instagram, what is the real need? The need is, hey, I want to kill time, or I want to get entertained, or I just want to see what my friends are doing. And two, amongst those needs, it will help you identify which need is easily met versus which need is not easily met, and hence you know what to tackle. So those are the friction points. Okay. So on this slide, I have a couple of definitions. Like, super honestly, these are not something that you really need to remember or you need to know, or it'll be asked in any interview, but this is more like just some general information about the universe of analytics. So there are two major categories, quantitative and qualitative, right? Quantitative, as the name suggests, is basically something that can be quantified. If you can count it, if you can measure it, it's quantitative. So metrics like MAUs, which is monthly active users, is countable, so it's quantitative. Revenue is countable, so it's quantitative. Qualitative is exactly the opposite. It's descriptive in nature. It is usually expressed not in numbers but in language. So you can't really convert this analytics or this data into numbers. I mean, you can, but the raw data is always expressed in words. So if I ask a user, how do you feel about using my product, they'll probably say, hey, you know what, it's really easy, I really enjoy it, things like that. They will not say that I feel 10 or 7 and things like that. Similarly, if I ask a user of, hey, what's the biggest problem when you're browsing the Instagram reels, and they're going to say things like, I just hate it that I get irrelevant posts and I get posts from people I don't follow. So they're not going to say that my problem is 5, things like that. So that's qualitative. Then there are 3 or 4 other types of analytics. Descriptive, as the name suggests, it's basically just interpretation of data, right? So if you're trying to answer the question of what happened, that's usually descriptive analysis. There is diagnostic, which basically, when you've identified that something has happened, then you try to ask yourself why it happened. So you're now trying to find the reason of something that's happened. That's diagnostic analysis. Predictive, again, as the name suggests, you're trying to predict what will happen in the future. So if Instagram is getting an average adoption of 20%, they would also like to predict if this 20% will stay constant, will it go up, will it go down, and then base decisions on that. Prescriptive is when it's more action oriented, where you're actually prescribing something, where you're saying, hey, let's do this based on data. And then it basically answers the question of what should we do next. So like I said, this is more like more of an FYI. If you know it, good. If you don't know it, it's not like your manager or anybody in the org will ask you to do, hey, why don't you do diagnostic analysis? They'll probably just say, hey, can you help me understand why it happened? So the questions are more important than the names of the definitions. Okay, now we'll kind of change gears just a little bit and focus only on analytics for product managers. And again, I'm going to take a pause here, and I'm going to ask everybody in the chat, help me understand what you think or why you think product analytics is important for PMs. Hey Ritu, yes, I think the deck will be shared. Impact of decision evaluation. Okay. To check if you're in the right direction, to make data-driven decisions. Insights are needed for PM. User points, measure success, measure what is shipped. Basically about product matrix. Improve user experience, understand what's happening, understand the right problems, helps in creating a roadmap. To make a data-driven decision, user engagement prediction, solve customer pain points. Okay, I think I scrolled up a bit too much, sorry. Planning the roadmap, intuition isn't enough. According to the sites, we can see what product is getting high reach, data is required to make decisions. Okay, so I think a lot of you have touched on something that I also like talking about. It is really important for decision making. And I think somebody also mentioned that, data is better than opinions, and like evidence is always better than opinions. So very, very theoretically speaking, product managers are making a lot of decisions every day, right? And these decisions could be as small as, what time should we have our stand-up? And as small as, is this like, should this be a document, or should this be an email, or should this be a deck? To something as critical and as large as, hey, what should be our strategy next year, and what should we focus on, and how much money should we spend on marketing and things like that. Now, all of these decisions need to have some kind of evidence behind it, because if they don't, then everybody around you will kind of take you for granted, or they might not have they might not have trust in you. So data is extremely important to make decisions and build credibility behind those decisions, because anybody can make those decisions, right? You don't need specifically a product manager to answer the questions that I shared, but product managers will always make objective decisions. They will have evidence behind it, and that is where analytics and data in general comes in. And I think the second aspect is that if you're doing analytics well, which we'll talk about, what it means, it will always improve the quality and the speed of decision making, right? And both of them are really, really important as a PM. You don't want to make wrong decisions. That's the quality aspect of it. And you don't want to take a year to make a decision about your product. So velocity is also really important. So the first thing is that if you're asking the right questions, and one of the ways that I look at product analytics is always an answer to a question, right? So an example is, hey, what is my revenue this month, or how much has my revenue grown? Or let's say when I was at Zomato, one of the most popular questions was, how many orders did we do today, and what is the growth rate of my week on week orders per week, sort of a thing. So every question needs an answer, like the question that I kind of called out, and that is what is analytics. So in my mind, it is always a question and answer. So if you don't ask the right question, there is a lesser chance you will get the right answer. And if you don't get the right answer, you'll either make a very bad decision, or you won't be able to make a decision. So that's my number one need for analytics, where you need to be asking good questions, you need to be getting answers, and then making decisions on it. The other thing is that I think somebody else already mentioned in the chat that analytics usually helps you look at trends, which in itself is really important for PMs, because making decisions for the future based on what you know today is very hard. So you would always like to look at trends, be it internal or external, right? You want to look at how the industry is doing. So if you're in e-commerce, then you'd like to look at the trends of spending or trends of number of orders that have happened in India in the last 10 years and at what rate is it growing and things like that. But internally also you look at numbers, trends, etc. And then the most important thing is that if you're doing this right, if you're asking the right questions and getting answers, you will be able to identify opportunities. And then I think somebody initially mentioned analytics is used to create roadmaps. In my mind, that is very, very true, right? So it helps me identify friction points. It helps me identify user behaviors or user needs. That's the first thing. Then it helps me identify friction points or areas which could use improvement. Then it also helps me identify if this friction point is large enough to solve. So what that means is that, if there is let's say there is a problem in creating a new account on Instagram, but that problem is only faced by 0.1% of the population. It is definitely a friction point for those people, but it's not a big enough opportunity to solve, assuming that there are other bigger opportunities. So analytics and data in general will help you identify the opportunity. It will help you it will help you create the size of the opportunity, and hence it will help you prioritize and, pick the right one and put it on your roadmap. Okay, so now what I'll do is, again, switching gears just a little bit, I'll try to call out how product managers or in general analytics works in organizations in product and tech orgs. Now, the caveat here is that this will differ greatly depending on the size of the org, right? If it is a very mature org, let's say, the Google or the Facebook of the world, they work very differently than a startup. And companies that are in middle try to sort of, build or use the best of both worlds. So they'll also try to have a startup mindset, but they'll also try to get some processes from the bigger tech. So this representation is somewhere in between. It's a little bit more skewed towards mature orgs, so it's not very startup-y. But I'll also talk about, in startups, how things are different. So think of it this way, that a product manager kind of sits in between multiple stakeholders, right? Let's say this person is in a B2B org where a lot of the sales happens through sales teams. It's not necessarily product-led sales. And in this org, on the right-hand side, you have these stakeholders who could have multiple questions that are specific to the product. So the salespeople could ask things like, "Hey, we had acquired 1,000 customers last month. Can you help me understand how they're doing? Are they using the product? Are they retaining? Are they engaging?" Product leaders will ask you questions which are more strategy driven. So can you help me see trends of, are we able to meet our revenue goals for 2023? Are we behind? Are we lagging? If we're lagging, what should we do? And so on. So all of these people and any of these people could be asking any number of questions to the product manager. The moment these questions start coming in, what the product manager does is this person goes to an analytics team. And the composition of an analytics team, again, depends on the size of the org. But let's say this is a medium-sized org. You can have analysts, you can have data scientists, you can have financial analysts, you can have restaurant analysts, or you could just have like a generic analyst team. You can also have something that a lot of the companies call as BI, which is business insight team, who creates dashboards and things like that. So the second step is that now the product manager kind of consumes the question that they have got from the right side of the screen. They kind of process it to some level in their head. And the reason they are doing this processing is twofold. One is they are validating if this is an important question to ask, because if they pass on to the question to the analytics team, they're going to be using their time and they want to make it meaningful. Two, maybe this question was asked in the past and hence they already have the answer. If they do, they'll just get back to the person with the answer. They don't necessarily have to go to the left side of the screen. But let's assume it's a good question and it needs answering. So what happens then is that the analytics team actually does two things, right? They will first share some level of data, which could look like either a dashboard or a Google sheet, or even the raw output from an SQL query. And then they will also share findings or insights from that data. So step 3 is where the one person from the team on the left, whoever is doing this analysis, will actually set up a meeting with the product manager and will discuss the findings and the insights so that both of them can share their opinions and they can understand that they're interpreting it correctly. The reason step 2 happens is because product managers usually are also very adept with data, and they can start doing their analysis also in a silo before they start talking together. The reason to do this is that, if you have the same data and you have 5 people looking at it, there is a very high chance that all 5 of them will have something different, like a different insight or a different way of looking at it. So in my mind, that's a really good exercise where, I personally enjoy getting access to raw data so I can do my high level analysis. Then I would probably meet the data analyst who, shared the data with me, and I'm going to share my notes. I'm also going to hear their opinions and their insights, and then we sort of collate and finalize that, hey, you know what, these are the top 3 insights and this is the answer to the question that we were asking. And finally, we just return those insights or answers or decisions to the person who asked the question. Yeah, I think that's pretty much the equation. I think there are a few questions which might be relevant to this slide. So let me see if I can take any of them. How about a new product where we don't have enough data? So I think that's a very fair question. The answer, unfortunately, is not very straightforward. The answer to that is, if what you will make decisions on whatever data you have, whatever quantum, right? The quantum could be less, it could also be 0. And then everything else becomes intuition, right? So usually what happens is, in a startup kind of a setup where your product is really new, you're still struggling to get usage. And if you don't have usage, it's very difficult to see usage patterns and trends and friction points. Then you start using a lot of your intuition and your gut feel. And then you focus more on experimentation, right? So the opposite of access to data is a lot of hypothesis generation, right? So what that means is that, let's say I'm not Instagram, but I'm a new social media. And now I'm also seeing that people are not signing up. So at this point of time, I don't have data. Since I'm a startup, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start thinking of reasons, right? So I'm going to hypothesize, hey, maybe, you know what, they just like Instagram better, or maybe, you know what, they're not even aware of our product, or maybe they don't know why we are so good or why we are better, etc. So I'm going to create like a list of 7 to 10 hypotheses. I'll see which hypothesis intuitively makes the most sense, and then I'll start experimenting to validate that. So the answer is that when you don't have data, then you have to kind of depend on intuition plus experimentation to validate or invalidate your intuition. And I think somebody mentioned, Udit mentioned, that typically for startups, qualitative data becomes important, where if you have access to users, you'll just call them up. Like literally, you'll call them up and ask them, hey, why are you not using the product? Or what is your friction point? Or how can we make it better? Or what is your problem? And so on. Okay, what is the difference between an analyst and a data scientist? An analyst is usually, actually a data scientist is usually who's doing some kind of, creating some kind of models, right? And they usually work on a little more complex level of analysis, where there is a vague problem statement, and there could be multiple themes of answers, and that might also need some level of machine learning or AI or any basic algorithmic models. And that's what data scientists usually work on. Analysts usually have a smaller scope, right? Not necessarily, like, maybe that's not the right way, but analysts usually have a clearer ask. So they are more responsible for ensuring that the quality of the data is correct, ensuring that we are always querying the right tables, ensuring that we are, our queries are optimized, and we are not sort of, bringing, like, increasing the wait times on the servers, things like that. And their primary responsibility is, you give them a question, they will quickly pull out the relevant data, form some insights, and share it with you. So even the duration of the analysis done by analysts will be a little smaller, whereas done by data scientists will be a little longer. Okay, are there any metrics for assessing a product? There are, and we will actually cover exactly that topic in the metrics section of the presentation. Okay, I'm quickly reading. So Nikita has a question. Would you recommend learning data science being in product? The short answer is no. Like, you don't have to be a data scientist, but you still need to have a meaningful conversation with the data scientist. So what that means is, if you have a complicated analysis, or if you want to do a predictive analysis, you'll probably work with a data scientist. Now, when this data scientist is trying to understand the problem statement, or when they're trying to explain the answer to your question, you need to be able to speak their language. You need to be able to understand why their recommendation makes sense or why it doesn't make sense. So you need to know enough to have a meaningful conversation, but you don't need to be creating the models yourself, or you don't need to be an expert in data science itself. Okay. Yes, Majaz, that is exactly right. If the product is new, we are experimenting, we are making hypothesis first, then experimenting to validate the hypothesis. Okay, actually, I think that's a relevant question. So a lot of people ask me this question where, sorry, let me go back. What are some tools to use or what are some tools to be familiar with to learn analytics? My answer actually is not something that I think a lot of others recommend. My answer is like, honestly, it doesn't really matter. The reason it doesn't matter is because, one, when you're joining an org as a PM, it's not like you won't join an org if they use different analytic tools than you are used to, right? And as a hiring manager, I can say that, if I use specific tools at my org, and if the person who I'm interviewing hasn't used these tools, I don't take that as negative, right? Because the underlying assumption is that, one, the person should be able to do analytics, right? Like, this person should be able to look at data, drive insights, and make decisions with confidence. Like, that's the underlying skill I'm looking for. And if this person is smart enough, and in my mind, product managers are really smart, then it doesn't matter what the tool is, right? If they are used to Google Analytics, but I'm using Mixpanel, I'm pretty confident this person will be able to use Mixpanel within a couple of days. And whatever they don't know, or it's taking time, I will share that knowledge with them. Similarly, if somebody has been used to Tableau, which is very different than a Google Analytics or Mixpanel, I'm fairly confident, in my interviews, if this person is smart enough, they'll be able to switch. So it's the same thing, right? Like, let's say when you're on your phone and you have multiple apps, and there is a new app that you download, you'll probably learn how to use this new app in a few days, right? Because the underlying skill is that how phones work, how to download an app, how to sign up. You also know, if you get stuck, you can just play around and figure out. And if nothing works, you'll ask people, you just Google of how to do X on this app, things like that. So in my mind, while I will share the names of the tools that I've used, in my mind, that's not something that you should be fairly or too concerned about. What you should be concerned about is learning analytics as a skill, whatever tool you have access to. In general, I've used Mixpanel, I've used Google Analytics. At Yelp, we use a lot of Tableau for our internal reporting. We still use a lot of Google Sheets. I don't think there is any analytics done without Google Sheets or Excel sheets. I've been exposed to Heap, Amplitude, a couple of others, but those are the primary ones. Okay, maybe I will take one more question on this slide and then move on. Okay, I think I'll take this one. So, sorry. From all the PMs I've worked with, no one ever used SQL to query data themselves, which is quite basic. Do you think? So again, I think, so this question from Devain is very relevant, because I hear the same feedback, in the sense of a lot of people aspiring and new PMs ask me, hey, should I learn SQL? Is it a requirement? The short answer is no. The long answer is, if you know it, it makes your life really easy. Because if you know it, and if you look at this diagram again, you don't have to do step one and everything beyond, right? If there is an easy question or an easy analysis that the salesperson has asked you, and you are quite familiar with SQL, you probably can run the query yourself and just cut the cycle short. So it definitely helps, but it helps you in your day-to-day life, right? But the other thing is still true. I think the earlier question, where you need to know enough to be having a meaningful conversation with the analyst, right? The analyst will never ask you, hey, can you look at my SQL and see if there is anything wrong, or can I make it better, and things like that. But they might refer to things of, hey, you know what, I use this join and that is how I'm getting this result. Maybe I should use a right join instead of a left join, things like that. So if you know it, it just makes your day-to-day functioning and day-to-day alignment and conversations a little easier. But it's never a requirement, until and unless you are in a data company, right? Some companies are so data oriented that they just want PMs to know it. But in my experience, 80 to 90% of the jobs, you don't necessarily need to know SQL. Okay, I'm going to switch gears now, just because we are kind of behind on time. All right, again, pausing here to see what you all think of metrics. It's a very commonly used term. Sometimes it's defined correctly, sometimes it's not. So again, start typing in the chat and help me understand what all of you think about metrics. KPIs, okay, KPIs stand for key performance indicators. Ways to analyze your KPIs, measures KPIs, North Star metric, numbers, parameters. Okay. I mean, I think all of you get the essence of the message. Like the answers I've read are fairly on point. So metrics are basically data points, right? And data points can be called KPIs, they can be called data, they can be called metrics. But I think the important thing is that they are usually measuring performance of something that is critical to your business or to your product, right? You can have 1,000 metrics, you can have 1,000 ways of looking at data, but in our world as a PM, we need to be very cognizant and clear that we only care about certain metrics, and the ones that we care about are the ones that are helping us helping us measure performance of something very important. So again, some very commonly used examples are DAUs, daily active users, right? So if a big tech platform like an Instagram or even like a Netflix or Spotify wants to measure the size of the audience that uses their platform, they look at something like a daily active user or a monthly active user. Churn rate is, again, same example like Netflix, Spotify, they want to measure how many people are leaving their platform and not coming back. It's very important to know that. Then other metrics like ARPU, which is average revenue per user, NPS, etc. So I won't get into the details of the common metrics, but I do have a resource which is absolutely free, in which I created an exhaustive list of the most commonly used metrics. And in this example, in this case, I think I took Instagram Reels or Instagram in general as the use case, and I created a long list. So feel free to download this Notion database. What it does is, the link is on the deck, Anshul, so you can directly link from there. But it'll talk you through what the metrics are, how are they defined in the context of Instagram, and why are they important. And I would urge all of you, whoever gets access to this, also to focus on why are they important, because that's the real learning here, right? Anybody can come up with a list of metrics. Okay, so now let's start talking about how should product managers think of metrics, right? And this is pretty much the most important question. So like we spoke on the previous slide, metrics are measuring something, right? It could be performance, it could be goals, etc. So the first step is always to decide what you want to measure. And it is really important to ensure that these things that you're measuring are the most important ones. So this is my approach and process of, if I'm trying to create metrics for a product that I own or a feature that I own, this is the process that I will use, right? And to give you some context, I will walk through the process in a lot of detail. I also have a real example at the end of the slide, which is around Instagram Reels. Given the time, I might not be able to walk through this, but all of you have access to this, so you'll be able to see, if I were creating metrics for Reels, how I would do that. Okay. All right. So this is how I do it, right? Every time you think of something that's important, the first thing that should come to your mind is, what is my company's goal? Because if you're measuring anything that does not contribute to your company's goal, then no matter how good that metric is, in the company's perspective, it's useless, right? So every time you think of metrics, start with the company goal. The second is a North Star metric. So I will define what North Star metric means, and then I'll help everybody understand the importance. So the North Star, the reason it's called a North Star metric is because, long back when we didn't have, GPS or maps or anything like that, when navigators would go around the world, they would know if they wanted to go north or east or south, etc. And the only way for them to find out was that they would look up in the sky and the North Star is visible, and they would not assume, they would know that that is the geographical north. And then they would, turn their direction however they want. So that is how a North Star sort of came into being. It always guided people in the right direction. Now, when we translate this into a metric or product management, it does the exact same job. So North Star is usually a metric that is always used as a guiding light, meaning if you're improving that metric, then you're doing a good job, right? Then you're in the right direction. But unfortunately, there is never a world in real world product management where you can just have one metric for your product and base success on that. That is where, secondary or health metrics come in. Basically, this is where, the list kind of gets long. It's never a single metric. And these are metrics that help you gauge the success and the health of your entire product. And we'll, when we go deeper into what these metrics mean, hopefully it makes the point better. But the goal here is that, again, if we go back to, let's say, Instagram or Instagram Reels, maybe my North Star metric is, the number of minutes spent per week. And I want to keep increasing that number. But at the same time, I also want to look at things like, hey, are people really enjoying the content? So maybe I look at how many people engage with it. Do they like it, share it, comment? Do people come back? Like, do they only look at it once a week or twice a week or thrice a week, etc.? All of these things are very important, because if I don't know this, the second layer, then I don't know what to improve. Then I don't know what to do next in my product, right? That is why you just can't only look at North Star. And then finally, there is something called as guardrail metrics. Guardrail metrics basically is something that you never directly impact, but they are very, very important to the company. So what that means is, let's say if you are the product manager for Instagram Reels, and you are trying to increase engagement on Reels or more time spent on Reels, one of the impact could be that people are spending lesser time on stories and lesser time on the home feed. And theoretically, hypothetically speaking, let's say that when users spend more time on home feed, they look at more ads, and hence there is more revenue generated, right? Or let's say there is an analysis that says people who spend more time on feed have a higher LTV, or they spend more time on the platform. So now let's say you launched a feature which, got people excited to spend more time on Reels, but they're lesser time on feed. Hence the total, like, at an Instagram level, the LTV has gone down. LTV basically stands for lifetime value. So in this case, lifetime value becomes a guardrail metric. So while you're increasing your own metric, you shouldn't be decreasing these critical metrics, even if you don't own them. That is what guardrail metrics mean. Okay, so summarizing all of that, always start with the company goal. Try to create a North Star metric. That is the metric that you want to directly impact. Then have a list of multiple secondary metrics. We'll go into that. And then this section becomes the metrics that you want to directly impact or directly measure, right? And this should be based on whatever you're doing in your product. So your product should have some impact on these metrics. Guardrail metrics is completely the opposite, where you want to measure them, but you are never directly impacting them. There will be indirect consequences to this metric. We will go into how to create a North Star metrics in just a second. Okay. All right. I'm going to go through the slide a little quick because I want to get to the next slide, which is exactly answering question: how do we create North Star metrics? How do we create secondary metrics and so on? So some of the mistakes that I've noticed over my experience, a lot of the mistakes I made myself, all of that is summarized on this slide. So whenever you're thinking of metrics, always have a question in your mind, right? And I have examples of what questions to have, but you have to have a good question to get an answer. If you don't have a question, no matter what you get, you will not know what to do with it. And a lot of the times I find PMs looking at millions of rows of data, and they don't know what to do with it because they don't have a question in mind. Keep it simple. I've noticed a lot of people, especially coming from a mathematical background, or people who enjoy working with numbers or are comfortable with numbers, they will create the most complicated metric in the world. That metric in itself will take 5 minutes to comprehend and understand what it really means and how it is calculated, and it'll always have like a very tough equation to solve. They never work, right? The reason they never work is because in a real life, when I am creating metrics, I'm sharing it with at least 20 other people in my organization. Now, if I have to spend 5 minutes just to explain it to all of these 20 people, I've not done my job correctly. The third aspect is when you create metrics, always think of all user types. This is again, a mistake sorry. Yeah, I'll try to go through the IG Reels fairly quickly. So always think of all user types. What that means is that in an Instagram Reels kind of a situation, you have your users, you have your creators, you also have advertisers. So when you're creating metrics, you need to be catering to all three of them. You can't just think of one person and create metrics. The fifth one is also something that happens quite often, where people don't know if the metric they're creating is useful and or easy to cheat, right? Useful could mean something like, if a metric is going up, does it really mean anything? So let's say if you've narrowed down a metric that you want to measure the number of app installs, or you want to measure the number of signups on your app. Now the question is like, what if people sign up but they don't do anything after signing up? Does this number really mean anything for the business? In all probability, no. So you really have to be very cognizant of the aspect of, is it truly useful or not? And how do you answer that question is you need to check if this metric actually contributes something to the company goal. Similarly, some metrics are very easy to cheat. So if you're looking at a platform like, any platform that does hotel bookings, when you search for, a hotel based on your requirements like city, date, and whatnot, you start seeing a lot of results. Let's say there is a PM who owns the success of the search page, and for whatever reason, they have used CTR, which is a click-through rate, as their success metric. So click-through rate just basically means that if 100 people land on the search page, how many of them actually click on a search result? Now, this metric in my mind is very easy to cheat, right? Now, all this PM has to do is to just make the titles of the search results very clickbaity and say things like 5-star hotel at 50% discount, or only for you, completely free. And the CTR will go very high. You might get 80-90% of the people clicking on something. So that is why it is really important when you're thinking of success, you're not creating metrics that can be cheated. And this is one example. And then finally, there is never a perfect list, right? Metrics are context specific, they're company specific, they're also person specific, which means that if you were to ask 2 product managers to create success metrics for the same product, there is a high chance they will land with different list of metrics. Okay, so let me see if I can, instead of doing the questions, I can jump to Reels example. I think I should be able to do that. Okay, here is another resource, by the way. This is a list of, I've just taken popular use cases like, a job platform, dating platform, e-commerce, OTT like Netflix, and I've created a North Star metric for them. Again, free resource. Click on the link, you'll get access to it, and then focus more on the last column, where it is very important to understand why is this metric the North Star metric, and why not any other metric. Okay, so let's quickly talk about Reels, and I'm going to pause for questions after the Reels discussion. So I'm hoping everybody's familiar with Reels. Reels is basically a vertical scroll feed where you open the app, you start seeing short videos which are catered to your interests and your engagement. And I think you can comment, like, share, etc. Okay, so when I start about thinking of the goal, now I know that Reels is owned by Instagram, which is owned by Meta. Meta has a very high level vision of giving people the power to build community and bring the world closer. So this is the vision that I want to be sure that my product, in this case, Instagram Reels, is adding to that vision, right? The second aspect I want to do is, again, coming from the best practices, I want to think of all of the users in the ecosystem, in the equation. In this case, there is a consumer, there is a creator, there is Instagram. The one that I don't have on the list is also advertiser. Now, for me to be able to create a North Star metric, I want to create a metric that helps measure success for all of the users and all of the participants. So from a consumer perspective, this person who's logging in to the app, they want to see good content, right? How we define good is a separate issue, which we'll talk about, but they just want to see content that's enjoyable, that's engaging, that's getting them entertainment. From a creator perspective, they want more and more people to see their content, right? If I'm putting something out there, like as a creator, if I'm putting something out on LinkedIn, I want more and more people to see, to engage, to comment, and things like that. So similarly, Instagram creators want that. Advertisers just want more revenue, right? They want more and more people to see their ads. They want more and more people to click on it and hence land on their page and then buy their product or service or whatever. Instagram, as a company, would just want more and more people to stay on their app, be it on Reels, be it on Stories, be it on Feed, whatever. And since they're a public company, they also care about revenue. So they would want their monetization to keep happening. So now, based on all of this, I'm now going to move on to the second row, which is where I'll try to create my North Star metric. So now, every time you look at social media or every time you look at a product that is a two-sided marketplace, it is kind of difficult to create metrics for both sides of the platform holistically. But usually, especially in social media, the platform is very consumption-based. What that means is that if you're measuring consumption and consumer success, that will give you a very good signal of creator success, right? So what that means is that if users are, on Reels, they're looking at more videos, it's a good signal that they're enjoying, and hence it is a good signal that the quality of the content created is positive or is good, and hence it means that whatever the creators are doing is also good. So that is my point one, that for this exercise, some of my metrics will be very consumption focused, but they will automatically give me a proxy for the creator aspect of it as well. Now, in this case, again, looking at all of the users, it feels like if the users are spending more time on the platform, that kind of satisfies all of the user needs. Consumers spend more time means they like it. Consumers spend more time means more of creators' videos are being seen, so creators love it. Consumers spend more time, meaning they see more ads, they click on it, advertisers are happy. If all of the above are happy, then Instagram is happy, right? So that is why, in my mind, a good North Star metric here is the total hours spent on Instagram Reels per week, right? So this is a summation of hours. This is not per user or average or anything. And as long as this number is going up, it signals two very, very important things for me. One is that it answers the question, are more users using it? Because if more users use it, the total number will go up. And are the users using it more? Because if a single user starts using it more, even then the total hours goes up. So now going back to the aspect of how do I come up with a North Star metric, there are two approaches here. One is always look at the user ecosystem, list out all of the users and try to create a metric that caters to all of them, or at least most of them. Second way to do it is ask yourself the question, which is here on the right bottom: are more users using it, and are users using it more? And if there is a metric that can answer both of these questions, usually it's a good North Star metric, right? Now, if we were to do this in the case of Uber, right, for their, let's say for their cab or taxi business, a lot of people start thinking of the North Star metric as the number of rides taken per week. Now, while that's a good metric, the challenge with that is that some rides are shorter. You could go from your house to some place which is very close, like 5 kilometers, and you'll end up paying whatever 100, 150, maybe 200 rupees. Whereas you might go from, let's say from Noida to Gurgaon, which is, I don't know, 30, 40 kilometers, which will, cost you anywhere between 1,000, 1,500 rupees. So these rides are not equal, right? And if your metric is treating them equal, then it's not doing a good job. So if I were to ask the question of are more users using it and are they using it more, maybe I think about the number of kilometers driven per week, because that will signal that more people are on the platform and they're doing longer rides, because as a platform, I would prefer longer rides. So again, if you want to practice North Star metrics, just, this resource will help you do that. Okay, let's move on to secondary metrics. I usually like to break secondary metrics into multiple buckets. And the first bucket is adoption. Some people call it acquisition, activation. You can call it whatever you want. It basically signals if have people started using the product. That's how I look at the first bucket. And the questions I ask here are twofold. One is I want to know how many users are using it, and two, what is the headroom, right? So what that means is that as of today, Instagram is used by pretty much 40% of the entire world. So they have about 2 or 3 billion users or something like that. But since I'm looking at Reels, I'm going to first look at how many users use Reels. So let's say, again, I'm making these numbers up. Let's say 50 million users every week use Reels, whereas Instagram is used by 1 billion users a week, right? And when I look at this, when I say using, the using part needs to be defined somehow, right? What does it mean? Does it mean that I open the app? Does it mean that I browse or click on one photo or one reel? Does it mean that I spend X seconds, etc.? So whatever it is, it needs to be defined. And one of the common metrics that a lot of social media uses is active users, or WAUs, MAUs, DAUs. And the A in it needs to be defined explicitly, right? So I don't know how Instagram does it, but it could be something like, if I'm defining the metrics, and since my North Star is around time spent, maybe I say that users who spend more than 30 seconds on Reels, I will consider them as active and they count towards my WAUs. So the message here is twofold. One is you need to know the total number of users, but you need to define who is a user, or you need to define what does using the product mean. The second aspect, which I'll talk about now, the headroom, is that we need to know how much space is left to grow, right? If all of the Instagram users are already using Reels, then honestly speaking, there is not a lot of headroom. I can't grow it more than the population of Instagram, right? So maybe I don't focus on adoption in that case. But if it's the opposite scenario, where only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10% of Instagram users are using Reels, then I have a 90% headroom, right? And that is my second metric, where I will look at a ratio of active users on Reels divided by the active users on Instagram as a whole, and that will give me the headroom. So if this percentage is 10, that means 90 is my headroom. So there is a lot of scope to grow. Then I want to look at engagement. Again, the questions I ask for engagement are twofold. Do users like the product, and do they like it enough to come back? Even though the second question kind of borders on retention, because every time you talk about coming back, it is a retention metric. But in my mind, retention is also an engagement metric. So here, what I will do is I will probably look at something like median minutes spent per user per week, right? The moment this number is going up, I know people are spending more time. Every user is spending more time on my product, and that is a great signal of answering the question, do they like it? They'll only increase their time if they like it. And then if I want to look at stickiness, or do they like it enough, do they come back often enough, I would look at a ratio of my active users. So I could do something like a daily by weekly or a weekly by monthly, just to see how often they come back. And I want this ratio to be as high as possible, because I want everybody to be coming back every day. The one thing that I think I didn't mention is that, which was actually covered in one of the meta slides, was that every time you create a metric, you have to have a time frame around it. You can't say that I'm measuring active users. You have to say I'm measuring active users per week or per month or per year. You can't say I'm looking at median minutes spent per user. There has to be a time frame to it. And when you think of time frame, right, always think of weekly, yearly, monthly patterns. So if you think of social media, or if you think of Netflix, um, there is a very clear trend where people will spend more time on the weekends because they just have more idle time than on the weekdays. So a Monday is not equal to a Friday or a Saturday in terms of usage, right? So if I were to look at this metric daily, I would see a lot of variations, and hence it'll be very tough to drive insights. But if I were to look at 1 week and compare it to the other and compare it to the third and the fourth, the trends will more or less be the same. So in the social media context, even maybe Netflix context, weekly makes sense, but the larger messages always have a time frame for every metric. Okay, quickly. So I think this is the last slide, and then we'll open for questions. Then the question comes, what are the guardrails? Again, going back to our concept of guardrails, these are metrics that are important to the larger company, which you can indirectly negatively impact. And in this case, I think we already spoke about this. If spending time on reels has led to a decrease in total time spent on Instagram as a whole, that is a bad place to be, right? Because that means as a whole company, you might start losing revenue and you might start losing advertisers and so on. Similarly, revenue. Every time you have a newer feature or a product like reels is newer than stories, which is newer than feed, you will see that the average revenue per user on a new feature is always lesser. So if you've created such amazing features that nobody is now spending time on stories or feed and they are only on reels, you will start seeing the revenue dip, and you don't want to do that. Yeah, so that's how you think of guardrails. The other thing that you always need to think about when you're thinking of success metrics or metrics in general is trade-offs. What that means is that the list of metrics you have should be limited, right? There should be like one North Star, maybe 5 to 6 at the most, 5 to 10 health metrics and 2 or 3 guardrail metrics. You don't want to go beyond that, because the moment you go beyond that, it's very difficult to measure. It's very difficult to think and like decide which metric should I look at every day, because these dashboards PMs will be looking at every day or every week at least. So you want to keep the number small, and the moment you keep the number small, there will be some aspects that you're not measuring, right? So in this case, we don't have any direct metrics measuring the consumer, but I'm okay to take that trade-off because I know that my consumer metrics are a proxy for the creator metrics. Similarly, I did not have any in my primary and secondary, I did not have any revenue metrics. And since Meta is a public company, revenue is important. But that's still fine, because as long as my consumption is increasing, my revenue model is based on consumption, and my revenue will keep going up. And since this product is fairly new, maybe I'm not focused on monetization yet, so I'm focusing more on engagement. But with that said, there is still no metric that is measuring creator retention or creator engagement or creator loyalty, which in today's world is very important, because a lot of creators are now going to TikTok and other platforms and things like that. So that is a trade-off, right? So the reason to do the trade-offs is, one, to identify the things that you're not measuring, and two, if you're not measuring, are you okay? And if you are not okay, then you need to sort of have a good answer of why is it not in your dashboard. Okay, I think that's pretty much it. I'm just going to, help you see that there are slides which kind of go deeper into how I create a North Star, how I create a secondary metric, and so on. So feel free to read that on your time. And then the second aspect is that doing this is the easiest thing you can do on your own and start building a very, very good sense of how to create metrics, right? Just pick up any product that you use on your phone or any feature in that app, and then ask yourself, if I had to measure success, what metrics should I be looking at, right? And I typically do this really, really often on Twitter. Like every week I'll post a question. Every time I see something new, I'm going to just post it on Twitter and ask them, hey, if you were the PM, how would you measure success? And then people start replying. And that in itself is a great learning for me. And I'm also pretty sure that people who reply to it, they're learning from it because they're reading other comments, they're thinking about it, things like that. If you want to practice question, this is one where Swiggy has something that's called as the offers and benefits section. assume you're the product manager for this and create success metrics. Okay, so I'm done. I'm going to hand it back for some minor announcements, and then I will take more questions from the audience. Back to you, Arif.
Thank you, Siddharth. That was amazing. The questions, the engagement that we received is a testament to the same. Thank you to everybody who joined us today on a Saturday evening. I'm sure you might have some personal plans, but the fact that you took out time to upskill is fantastic. Looking forward to seeing you all next Saturday for our next session. Have a lovely weekend ahead. Thank you.